What if Jesus chose silence at his trial? The court is in absolute silence. The accusations are thrown one by one, but Jesus does not respond. No defense, no explanation, no word to change the approaching fate. His silence weighs more than any cry. Something is wrong, and everyone feels it. As the trial progresses, Jesus' silence begins to cause more fear than anger. The authorities grow uneasy, the people are confused, and the disciples don't know if it's weakness or strategy. Each unspoken word amplifies the tension, because without an answer, there is no control. What if the true impact of that trial wasn't in what was said, but in what Jesus chose never to say? The verdict approaches, but the absence of a voice threatens to completely change the meaning of the cross, of guilt, and of truth itself, of truth. When Jesus is brought before the tribunal, everyone expects a reaction. The authorities organize themselves, the accusations are repeated, all eyes are fixed on him. But what follows is not a defense, but silence. A firm, conscious silence that disconcerts the accuser and unsettles the observer. Each second without a response transforms the trial into something unstable, out of control. The disciples feel the weight of that moment, unsure if the silence is surrender or resistance. Pilate realizes he is not facing an ordinary defendant, but someone who refuses to play the game of power. The trial continues, but something essential has already changed. Words have lost their power in the face of a choice that no one can interpret. As the interrogation progresses, Jesus' silence begins to erode the authority of the court. Questions pile up, but none find an answer. Accusers repeat arguments, raise their voices, try to provoke some reaction that justifies the condemnation, but receive only silence. The people watch, torn between discomfort and fascination, while the atmosphere grows heavy. The disciples realize that each unspoken word amplifies the impact of that moment. Pilate feels the pressure mounting, because judging someone who does not defend himself exposes the fragility of his own judgment. Jesus' silence does not end the process, but prolongs it, transforming the court into a space of doubt. Without answers, everyone is forced to confront not only the defendant but themselves. As time passes, the silence ceases to be merely an absence of words and becomes an uncomfortable presence. Each accusation made without response echoes through the court as something unfinished. The authorities begin to realize that they no longer control the narrative because there is no argument to win over someone who doesn't argue. The disciples feel fear, but also a strange clarity. Jesus is not silent out of weakness, but by choice. Pilate observes attentively, understanding that this quietude exposes the injustice more forcefully than any speech. The trial continues, but loses its original meaning. Without defense, without verbal confrontation, the guilt seems to slowly shift from the shoulders of the accused to those who insist on condemning him. As the trial nears its conclusion, Jesus' silence begins to generate collective unease. The people murmur, not understanding how someone can remain silent in the face of their own condemnation. The authorities feel something is eluding them, for without words, there is no way to distort, respond, or win. The disciples struggle internally, wishing he would speak, but realizing that each second of silence carries a deeper meaning. Pilate feels pressured, because the absence of a defense makes the sentence more visible and heavier. The court continues its course, but now everyone feels that the silence is not empty. It reveals intentions, exposes guilt, and transforms the trial into an uncomfortable mirror for every conscience present. As tensions reach their peak, Jesus' silence begins to alter the balance of the trial. The accusations no longer sound convincing, repeated more out of desperation than strength. The authorities realize that, without reaction, they are losing emotional control of the situation. The people watch in silence, sensing that something profoundly unjust is happening before their eyes. The disciples understand that this silence does not seek absolution, but revelation. Pilate finds himself cornered, because condemning someone who does not defend themselves exposes the weight of the decision brutally. Every wordless second transforms the courtroom into a stage of conscience, where guilt can no longer be hidden behind speeches. As the decision draws near, Jesus' silence becomes more unsettling than any response could. There is no plea, no attempt to escape, only a tranquil stand in the face of injustice. The authorities sense that the condemnation no longer seems like a victory, but a moral failure. The disciples watch with heavy hearts, realizing that speaking now would break something essential. Pilate hesitates, because every word he could extract fails to come, and this makes the act of judging even heavier. The trial continues but has lost control of the moment. Silence neither absolves nor accuses, it merely exposes. And in exposing, it forces everyone to take responsibility for what they are about to do, without excuses, without noise, without any way to hide. If this interpretation is making you rethink this story, leave a comment below with your perspective. These videos are meant to provoke reflection, and I read all the comments. And if this type of content interests you, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next ones. Silence spreads like a shadow among those present. Each breath seems too loud. Each gaze carries a weight no one wants to bear. The priests try to provoke a reaction, launching harsher accusations, but they encounter no resistance, only the same unwavering calm. This infuriates some and frightens others. For many their condemnation depended on a response that justified the hatred. Without it, only the naked truth remains. They are not judging a criminal. They are deciding the fate of someone who refuses to play the game of power. And this refusal begins to crack everyone's certainty. The governor watches in silence, troubled. The absence of words transforms the trial into a mirror, reflecting the guilt of each participant. Without defense, without plea, the process loses its legal meaning and becomes an empty ritual. The crowd begins to murmur, confused because they expected a confrontation, not such a profound emptiness. At that moment, the scales no longer weigh evidence, but consciences, and many realize that Jesus' silence is saying more than any speech could. Some begin to avoid his gaze. Others feel a strange pressure in their chests, as if they were being judged from within. The approaching violence no longer seems like a just response, but a desperate attempt to silence what silence has revealed. Each wordless second increases the fear because it becomes clear that the decision was made long before that judgment began. It is not the voice of Jesus that is missing there, but the courage of men to admit what they are about to do. Some begin to avoid his gaze. Others feel a strange pressure in their chests as if they were being judged from within. The approaching violence no longer seems like a just response, but a desperate attempt to silence what silence has revealed. Each wordless second increases the fear because it becomes clear that the decision was made long before that judgment began. It is not the voice of Jesus that is missing there, but the courage of men to admit what they are about to do. After the conviction, the silence spreads beyond the trial and reaches the streets, the homes, the consciences. People comment that something didn't fit that night, that the explanation everyone expected to hear was missing. Without words to confront the accusers, only doubt remains, and it grows like a slow shadow. Some begin to wonder if the truth really needs to be shouted to exist, or if, on the contrary, silence was the harshest way to reveal who was truly willing to listen. As the days go by, the silence of that trial continues to echo, not as an absence but as an uncomfortable memory. It seeps into accounts, prayers, whispered conversations. No one can accurately repeat what happened, because there was no speech to be remembered, only a presence that refused to explain itself. And precisely for that reason, each person fills the void with what they carry inside. For some, it was weakness. For others, obedience. But for many, the disturbing idea begins to emerge that the silence was not passivity, but a mirror that revealed the truth of each heart. In the end, silence becomes the hardest message to erase. Without a recorded defense, without words that could be distorted by time or used as a weapon by the victors, the trial ceases to belong to the books and begins to live in human consciousness. There was no final phrase to be quoted, no argument to be interpreted in different ways, only the absolute absence of a response in the face of power, accusation, and institutionalized violence. This silence traverses the centuries because it cannot be explained, justified, or concluded. It remains open, like a wound that neither bleeds nor heals. Each generation that returns to that scene is forced to confront it without intermediaries, without convenient translations, without moral shortcuts. The question ceases to be about guilt or innocence and transforms into something more uncomfortable. What would you do if you were there? The silence removes any future excuse because there was no manipulation, no rhetoric, no spectacle. There was only the conscious decision not to defend oneself before a system that had already decided the outcome. And that is precisely what makes that moment eternal. By remaining silent, he returned all responsibility to those who judged, to those who watched, and inevitably to those who hear this story today. Silence does not absolve, condemn, or console. It merely exposes. It exposes fear, the haste for punishment, the fragility of justice when confronted with the naked truth. Perhaps that is why this scene never loses its power. Because words age, speeches become obsolete, and arguments can be superseded. But silence, when chosen, remains intact. It offers no easy answers, allows no moral comfort, and does not close the story. It transforms the judgment into a mirror, forcing each person to decide, alone, what they truly saw that night and, above all, who they would have been if they had been in the crowd. If you enjoyed this approach and want to continue exploring stories that are almost never told this way, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And now, click on the video that's appearing on the screen. It directly complements what you just watched and may completely change the way you see this story.